Hi everyone, I'm Sapphire Duffy and I'm Senior Community Manager at Women Who Code, and I am so excited to introduce AmyJune. AmyJune Hineline is a Senior Community Manager at opensource.com, a project supported by Red Hat. She is also a Dribble core mentor, with a dual force on both open source community development and inclusivity. She is uniquely positioned to help individuals become more comfortable and confident as they contribute to their communities. She co-organizes various open source camps and conventions globally, empowering the individuals to forge deep community connections that benefit the whole. As a self-directed described non-coder, AmyJune helps communities discover how they can contribute and belong in more ways than code. I'm so excited to introduce AmyJune. Hi, Amy.
Thank you, Sapphire. That's a nice introduction. I appreciate it. Are we ready to start? So it's a short time, so I'm just going to dive in. I'm going to present a little bit about website accessibility when it comes to how we secure and access our websites. It's called captchas and other gotchas. Like Sapphire said, I am the Senior Community Manager at Red Hat, but more importantly, I'm a Drupal core mentor for the Drupal project, and I help organize accessibility talks, A11Y talks, where we go online and talk about accessibility every month. I do have a little bit of housekeeping. I'm not sure how captions are organized here. I think that they're on the hop-in side. And then there are images in my slide deck, but most of the images are purely decorative, just to add a little bit of flavor. So I won't be describing them unless they add some context to the actual words on the page. And then I usually try to share an accessible slide deck with people before the presentation, but I didn't have time to put alt tags on my images. So I'm going to do that directly after the presentation, and then I'll post it on my LinkedIn, which leads me to my LinkedIn is Volkswagen Chick, and then you can also find me on Mastodon. So who am I to talk about website accessibility? I have been in tech for about 7 years, but before that I was a hospice nurse by trade. So I understand how some people have difficulty accessing basic information, even accessing their email. Before we start, I want to remind people that violence and war are never the only option, and I want to hold light to all those in the Ukraine whose lives are in danger and disrupted by the refugees fleeing from the Ukraine, and the many Russians who are shocked and dismayed at the course that their government has taken. Here's Spot. He's my roommate and partner in crime. If there are any typos in the slide deck, we're going to blame him for running across the keyboard. So what are we going to talk about today? We'll go over some of the basic accessibility concepts along with some of the specific guidelines. Then we'll look at security options and what some alternatives might be. So a little bit about definitions, because I don't want to assume anyone's skill level around accessibility. So these are just going to be brief. We might hear WCAG, WCAG, the acronym thrown around a lot. That stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And the goal here is really to share a single shared standard for web content or digital assets accessibility. And WCAG is primarily for website content developers, people who author our tools, the web accessibility evaluation tool developers, and then really anyone who wants or needs a standard for web accessibility. And I want to note that accessibility and inclusion and user experience are all very different things. They complement each other, but they're different. POUR is a acronym for perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And these are these high-level principles that go around accessibility. Perceivable means that you should be able to identify content, and the UI, the user interface, by means of the senses. Operable means that you can understand how to use the controls and the buttons, you can navigate, and you can use any of the interactive elements on the page. Understandable. Users should be able to remember how to use the interface from page to page. You should be able to comprehend the content and learn and remember how to use that interface. And then robust. This is an important one that people sometimes often don't think about. Users should be able to use any type of user agent or technology that they want when they interact with our assets. This includes our websites, our online documentation, multimedia, and other information formats. So to break it down, what makes content accessible? There's those 4 broad parameters. We want to make sure that our assets are easy to see, so we accommodate visual needs. The Center for Disease Control here in the United States reports that approximately 12 million people, but I think that number might be a little bit higher since I last looked, 40 years and older in the United States live with some sort of vision loss, including 1 million people who are blind. But remember, there's other things to think about when we accommodate visual needs. Things like a cracked cell phone screen or glare from the sun. We want to make sure we accommodate motor needs, that it's easy to interact with, people who live with, a palsy, a shake from Parkinson's, or maybe have very limited mobility from paraplegia, from maybe something like Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS, or maybe an accident. But then there's also folks who might be handling a baby on a city bus and only have that one thumb to scroll on their phone. We want to accommodate auditory needs, so we want to make it easy to hear. When we address this one, we not only help individuals who are in noisy environments or silent environments, we also help our deaf and hard of hearing friends. And then that last broad parameter is make sure that it's easy to understand, and we accommodate cognitive needs. This can include people who are distracted, or have a difficult time focusing. And then I want to remind folks that there are different types of disabilities. And I kind of gave a couple of examples on each of those parameters, but 15% of the world's population lives with a disability. That's a lot of people. And that includes people that includes people who are in this virtual room with me today. And remember, as we get older, everyone becomes more disabled. There are temporary disabilities like recovering from LASIK, or maybe your screen needs to be dimmed. There are situational disabilities like a mouse, your mouse running out of batteries, or a smartphone or tablet in the bright sun. And then we have those permanent disabilities that we often think about the most. These are disabilities that people live with all of the time and that don't go away. And a new concept I've come across recently in the last 6 to 9 months are episodic disabilities. These are lifelong conditions, like maybe something like diabetes or HIV or cancer or Lyme disease, where some days are better than others. And people living with episodic disabilities experience periods of fluctuating health. Some days are good and some days are bad. Remember, depression can be an episodic disability. And not every disability can be seen. We can't make assumptions. There's people who are autistic. There's debilitating pain. There's fatigue, dizziness, cognitive differences, mental health issues, all sorts of different things, as well as the things that people most often think about, which is the hearing and the vision loss. Inclusion is not about giving special privileges to people. It's making sure that those barriers are removed. And this is a word that offends me a little bit. The word special privileges, special needs is sort of troublesome because these are basic human rights and there's nothing special about our needs. And this one's an interesting quote that I like to throw in because I think most people with some unseen disabilities have heard this from time to time, being called an edge case. When you call something an edge case, you're really defining the limits of what you care about. Okay, so now into kind of the meat. You heard me talk about robust, one of those one of the letters of the acronym. User agents, that's what robust, you can access your information using any sort of user agent. But what's a user agent? This is assistive technology. Sometimes you'll see it as AT. It's any device or software or piece of equipment that helps people work around the challenges that we have in learning and communicating and functioning with our digital assets. So we have screen readers. This is one people will talk about a lot. They're used to listen to the content of the web page. They convert text to speech, but we should also keep in mind when people use screen readers that they can be used along with visuals on the web page for folks with cognitive challenges. We have screen magnification software. These glasses I wear because it seems like every year the font gets smaller and smaller, and I'm hitting Control++. And it's true to its name. It magnifies what's on the screen. It makes it easier for us to read, especially if we live with like partial sight or maybe temporary sight impairment. It's used to enlarge the text on the screen, but they also have text-to-speech functionality as well. And for the sake of brevity, I have a few other user agents listed, and I do think it's important to go over these because we're talking about security measures right now, and you never know what user agent people are using to access your assets. So we have eye tracking. This is a system of that really monitors eye movement to control the mouse pointer and detects blinking to initiate those mouse clicks. We have accelerators. This is software or any kind of functionality that helps reduce the effort needed to type or click. Of course, we have keyboard customization. Lots of people use this, but it includes changing the mapping of the keys, assigning shortcut keys to functions, setting filters, and setting sticky keys. And this helps support single-handed typing. We have pop-up and animation blockers, which I'll talk a little bit more about at the end of the presentation. Pop-ups and modals and things like that. But they're web browser plugins or other software tools that stop those annoying automatic pop-ups and redirections, and gives folks options to stop, pause, and hide animations. This is a picture on the screen of a refreshable braille display. It's a mechanical terminal where the dots raise and lower dynamically as the characters are read out on the screen. Reading assistance. This is software that helps change the presentation of the content or provides other functionality to make it more readable. Changing font size, scanning the text for words and adding tooltips, reading the content out loud and perhaps highlighting the text that's being read out loud to keep people focused. And we have page maps. These display a little image of the entire web page, indicating and highlighting the portion of the web page that's currently being viewed. Again, it helps people with distraction. Okay. Authentication is a really hard word for me to pronounce, so I'm going to try really hard to get it right, but it's really our first defense when it comes to security. When authentication requires user input, best practices should always include giving your users options and choices. I'm going to say that again now, and I'm going to say it at the end of the presentation. When you have authentication, the best practices really calls for giving your users options and choices. So as we go along, I'll give some specific WCAG criteria that people can look up and follow along with. And then when I present my slide deck on LinkedIn, you'll have these links. Guideline 3.3.7, accessible authentication. This means that there is an accessible, easy to use, and secure method to log in to access content and undertake tasks. Who does this benefit? It kind of benefits everybody, but it helps people with cognitive issues relating to memory, reading, for example. Some folks have dyslexia or dyscalculia, where numbers can be hard to parse. It helps people with perception processing limitations. They should be able to authenticate regardless of the level of their cognitive abilities. So gated content. We see a lot of gated content in our spaces. Gated content requires a user to complete a form or purchase a subscription. So gated content is online materials. These can be white papers, articles, videos that require the users to fill out a form so they can access them. Sometimes it's just to get their email address, subscribe them to a newsletter, or, do some sort of marketing. White papers, these are marketers create white papers to educate people about a particular issue or explain or promote a particular methodology. We have ebooks, electronic books, webinars and learning courses, product demos, email curations, and this can include forums to exclusive communities, along with access to survey and perhaps content entries forms. So this is gated content. Now let's talk about some common security measures, because that's why we're here. CAPTCHAs. We see CAPTCHAs all over the internet, but what are they exactly? If you think, what does CAPTCHA even stand for? So let's start with what the acronym is. It's a completely automated public Turing test to tell computers and humans apart. You don't ever need to remember that. I just think it's interesting that there's an acronym and that's where it comes from. We have seen them as simple as, well, I must have changed the image. This image is not simple, but you can see they can be really simple, like maybe a checkbox that determines if we're human. Sometimes we'll see images, or we have to listen for letters, maybe even do a math puzzle. But often lately, we just see that checkbox asking if we're a human or a bot. And this image is a security check CAPTCHA, and it's very hard to read. So imagine, you live with, low vision, or you're on a bus and you're bouncing around trying to parse what those letters are, and are some of them even letters, so this is an example of an extremely complicated CAPTCHA. Not everyone can see the screen and identify images. When we talk about standard image accessibility, we include alt text. But when we provide alt text on a CAPTCHA, it defeats the purpose of weeding out those bots or machines, because they're able to parse it and read the alternative text. So sometimes we have things like simple math questions, 4 + 2 = what? Again, this can be challenging for folks with cognitive processing issues or dyscalculia. Or there's a picture up here of a math challenge that is so complicated. If you haven't taken, any advanced math, you would never know the answer. And often alternatives to CAPTCHA that are accessible, you want to offer alternatives to CAPTCHAs that are accessible for your entire user, all the consumers of your content, including people with vision, hearing, and neurocognitive disabilities. So timers, timers or time-based words is a very common security measure. The WCAG guideline around this is 2.2, providing enough time. The specific success criteria, we want to provide our users with enough time to finish their task. Not everyone can zip through a form or enter their credit card information at top speed. So there's the criteria are sort of broken down even further, things like making sure the timing is adjustable, or that there's no timing. Be sure interruptions can be postponed or suppressed by the user. When an authenticated session expires, allow the user to continue the activity without the loss of data, or that way when they come back, they don't have to re-enter all of that data. And then we want to make sure that certain users are warned of the duration of any of the user activity that could cause data loss. People with disabilities may require more time to complete activities, and time sessions can pose problems. Someone who has a reading disability like dyslexia will likely take longer reading or understanding instructions or the text on a form. Or someone who is deaf maybe more comfortable with sign language than the written word. And so, the words on the screen might slow them down with comprehension, with their comprehension level. And incidentally, this holds true for non-native speakers of your website's language. Someone who relies on screen reading software, because they're blind or have a vision loss or a learning disability, it could take more time locating all the elements on a page or understanding the page's layout. And unless the time limit is longer than 20 hours, it's really general best practices that all timed sessions should be able to be turned off, adjusted, or extended unless it's essential for an activity. A good example of this is buying concert tickets or paying bills online. And you can see this is an example of the image up here is a session timeout where it clearly states how much time I have left in my session, but it also allows me to reset the session so I have time to complete my tasks. TOTPs. These are time-based one-time passwords. These codes, well, the code input can hinder some folks who with sight or cognitive or motor skill disabilities. It might be difficult for someone with cognitive processing issues to take a code from one screen or one device to another in the designated time allotted. Sometimes the authenticator applications and messaging apps are not compatible with screen readers. So again, turn off the timing, adjust the timing, extend the timing. I've been on an authenticated, one-time, time-based one-time password, and it always gives me a little bit of anxiety when I'm on my phone and I have to enter that. I see that little timer clicking down, and it, makes me more nervous, and, I transpose the numbers. So really turning off the timing, adjusting the timing, and extending the timing helps everyone. What are some other verification methods for making sure we are who we say we are? We have biometrics. Biometrics is the technical term to refer to humans' physical or behavioral traits. So there's different biometrics that are often used to access our digital assets, voice recognition. But what if someone has a sore throat, or maybe their microphone is not working properly, or there's lots of background noise? There's facial recognition. It does not require sight, hearing, or significant motor skills, and it makes it really ideal for a lot of users. But hijabs or facial coverings, scarves, or maybe beards grown during COVID can affect the screen reading of your face. Fingerprint scanning, perhaps you've been working in the garden and you have chapped or dirty fingers, or maybe you've been, your fingers are burnt or scabbed from the last time you logged in. But think of those people who don't have limbs. How are they going to do fingerprint scanning if that's the only option? And then eye recognition. This is great. It can tell twins apart because it uses the iris for matching, but sometimes there's the loss of an eye, or maybe someone lives with cataracts. And so as we use biometrics, we have to think about the things that might be more complicated for someone using biometrics. And again, I'm going to say this at the end too, make sure that you offer different ways of accessing, if it's not just fingerprint, but have a different method of biometrics as well. Multi-factor authentication, we'll sometimes see this abbreviated as MFA. We have SMS. These are phone text messages. I have no idea what SMS stands for, and I should, because it's not very accessible to not know what the acronym is. But these are cell phone text messages. They're text codes. They may be a little bit less secure than our authenticator apps, but they're a common solution for the ease of use and wide availability. This trade-off might be worth it for users with difficulties typing codes quickly. And further, screen readers and text-to-speech functions are more likely to work seamlessly with a native app like texting. We have email-based identity verification. We have authentication apps. We have connected tokens. Tokens require users to plug a dongle into the device and maybe require a second step like pressing a button or using a biometric challenge. But they do not usually require users to input a code, making that multi-factor authentication process more accessible for our users who live with motor, visual, or cognitive differences. And this is a picture of one of my screens on my cell phone. And this is also a complicated thing if you have time-based stuff. These are all of the authentication apps for all the different programs I use. You can see I have more than 12 on there, so maybe think about using a common one, that way users, when they're trying to find the app on their phone, they don't have to have so many apps installed. So another thing that we're often asked to do is to scan our IDs and our birth certificates and our vaccination cards, certificate-based signatures. Some folks who live with a palsy or a shake are unable to hold the document or user agent still enough, for the app to scan if it's on the phone, like this. Or a person with low vision may not be able to line up the scanner and put the document in focus. So the WCAG guideline around this is 3.3.1, which is error identification. If an input error is automatically detected, the item that is in error is identified significantly that the users can see it. And the error is described to the user in text. The error message should be as specific as possible. Providing information about those input errors in text allows users who are blind or colorblind to perceive the fact that an error has occurred. And this success criteria may help people with cognitive, language, learning disabilities who have difficulty understanding the meaning represented by icons and other visual cues. We have 3.3.2, which talks about labels. Labels or instructions are provided when content requires input, important cues and instructions. Providing clear and unambiguous labels and instructions helps all users, but particularly those with cognitive, language, and learning disabilities to enter the information correctly. 3.3.3 is error suggestion. It automatically detects and suggests for corrections if they're known. Then the suggestions are provided to the users unless it could jeopardize the security or purpose of the content. But providing information about how to correct the input errors allows users to fill out the form successfully. Users who are blind or have some vision loss understand more easily the nature of the error that they inputted, and people with motion impairment can reduce the number of errors they need to change the input value. So what can we do about hidden passwords? We can provide form labels so folks know that they are hidden passwords. We should allow copy and paste functionality. And also think about allowing for tools to fill in credentials. You can see this is a basic Google password identifier here. You can select the checkbox that says shows password, and you'll be able to see the password, and that way you can see if there's an error that was made. So a couple notes about alerts, modals, and other pop-up-y things. There's a WCAG criteria around this too. It's not anything specific, but we're going to talk about the basic principle of being operable. user interface components and navigation must be operable. So there's a few listed here, and I'm not going to go over all of them. Again, I'll provide the link on my LinkedIn space afterwards so you can access these links on the deck. But we talk about target size. Can someone on a mobile phone who might have large fingers close the window? Or someone who has a palsy or shake, can they get to the target with their mouse? We talk about focus order. Does the user have to tab if you're using a keyboard only? Do they have to tab through the whole page to get to the cookie consent banner or to your pop-up to close it? Halfway through the page, you're going to lose those users. Invisible focus. So when those people are tabbing through, someone who uses an assistive device, do they know where they are on the page with a visual marker? And then when we talk about the accessibility of these pop-ups and other things, can a keyboard only user access the dialogue or pop-up? Is there a way for them to get to that pop-up dialogue and complete the information in that, or even close the window? And once they get into that pop-up, can they get out of the pop-up? If they can't, that's called a keyboard trap. So an accessible modal dialogue is one where keyboard focus is managed properly. People can see where they are on the screen. The correct information is exposed to the screen reader. And then you can use HTML or you can use ARIA to provide the necessary semantic information, or you can use CSS, to enhance the appearance, and use JavaScript to help you with the behavior. But again, think about it. Can people readily close those boxes? Can people readily get to that information? And can they get out of the information without it being a cumbersome process? So JavaScript pop-up windows should only be used to add significant advantage and functionality. It should be functional even if JavaScript is disabled. So I have an image up here of opensource.com. Where we have a pop-up that comes up that says subscribe to our newsletter. And you can see that there's an X there. If the pop-up opens in a new window or a new tab with either like that target attribute or the script, then we want to make sure we add a label that the link will open in a new window or tab. Many users, both screen readers or visual browsers, are confused when they do not realize a new window is open and are unable to use the back button. We also want to avoid disabling scroll bars and resizing options because people need those resizing options perhaps to see the font more clearly. So you want to be able to provide a no script alternative that uses plain text to direct users with JavaScript disabled to the appropriate information. And again, with those scroll bars, you don't want to disable scroll bars because as people make the size of your pop-up or whatever bigger, they might need the scroll bars to see those information. And then it's common best practices not to have two scroll bars at once. Status messages. This is a guideline 4.1.3. We want to make sure that users are aware of any important changes that happen on the web page, changes in content. And we want to do it in a way that doesn't interrupt their work. So when appropriate roles or properties are assigned to status messages, the new content is spoken by screen readers in a way to assist blind and low vision users. Most sighted users can observe the text peripherally when it's added to the viewport. Some possible uses of status messages include presenting a message about the number of search results returned, informing the user that an application is busy or available, displaying information about the progress or completion of a process. So more simply, this means that the status messages should be clearly labeled and in such a way in the code base that assistive technology such as screen readers can identify them and decide how to relay the information to the user. Alerts and status messages. This is a image of a Drupal admin page, and you can see in green that there's an admin message across the top. So these really provides a mean to turn off essential alerts. We want to provide a means to turn off essential alerts. We want to make sure that the use of color and hidden icons are not used as the only means of conveying the importance, because some folks may not be able to distinguish between colors. So if your banner is green because it's go, or yellow because it's caution, if that's the only indicator, some people won't know that because they can't distinguish between the colors. This is not only for people who have vision loss, but people, who have color blindness. It could be for people who have a glare on their screen. And you can see this text message across the top isn't the most accessible one. It's dark green on light green or blue on light green. So the color contrast isn't really good on this one either. Okay. So I told you we'd iterate what we talked about. And so I'm coming to the end, and I want to talk about what we learned again today. So we always want to provide our users with alternatives. We want to allow users to copy and paste details into username or password fields. We want to allow users to use external references for their details, either it be an aid to memory or to avoid transcription errors. We want to allow users to enter data from documents on their computer or password managers. I don't know if any of you have experienced this, but maybe the information is in a PDF and you go to highlight it in a PDF, but there's special characters. And so when you paste it, not all the characters come through, or maybe it's a little bit garblish. We want to provide users with a method to authenticate that does not involve a password. In cases where users cannot remember their password, provide an option to log in using a link sent to their email addresses. We should code input fields with the appropriate type, make sure that our user agents can identify where the input fields are with labels. Password fields should have a type of password code. Number field should have a type of number field. Providing the correct input type allows operating systems and those assistive technology users to provide the correct method input. For example, the numeric keyboard and output, for example, masking password fields. And to pre-fill, is that a word? Pre-fill? Yeah. Pre-fill fields where the data is available. For example, in a browser or an operating system, it remembers emails and password combinations. And then when using multi-factor authentication, ensure that your users are given plenty of warning, an advanced warning of the requirement and the time window. Make sure that the time is provided for users to verify without requiring a new code. If you do have short time windows, maybe they're required for security. Sometimes, the example is sending a link to the registered email address to bypass. Perhaps allow them to extend that time limit. Allow users with access requirements to be added to an exception list for multi-factor authentication. That's something to think about. And then when we talk about CAPTCHAs, provide alternatives. Again, users with visual impairments may not be able to use image-based CAPTCHA elements to authenticate themselves because they're not able to perceive the images themselves. Users with cognitive impairments may not be able to understand how to interpret the representations of characters in the image-based CAPTCHA. Remember that really complicated CAPTCHA we saw? And even that math-based CAPTCHA? We provide a text-based alternative to image-based CAPTCHAs. If you're able to use a CAPTCHA system based on a simple instruction instead, we talked about this, such as checking of a checkbox. But wherever possible, do not use CAPTCHAs at all. And something I hadn't talked about, we live in a global world, well, global world, of course, but we're all, the geographical barrier for most of us has been eliminated due to the internet. So remember to avoid culturally specific captchas. So if possible, avoid requiring users to identify objects that are specific to one cultural context or have regional differences in appearance. For example, asking British users to identify images of crosswalks may be a barrier because crosswalk is an American term. And then I don't have it on the slide. Do I? Yeah, you remember with those timers to allow to pause, stop, and add more time. And with that, we're at time basically. So I want to say thank you. And again, there's a QR code up here to find me on LinkedIn. I explained at the beginning of my presentation that I did not have time to make my slide deck accessible with alternative text. So I'm going to do that directly after my presentation and then post my slides online because they have links on almost every page. And then also I have links for additional resources, and I have tool links to help you look at your website in a from an accessibility audit point of view. Thank you. Hi, Sapphire.
Hi, AmyJune. Thank you so much for that incredible talk. I'm sure the chat was buzzing the whole time, and we had a lot of chat and a few questions that came through as well. So we have time, 4 minutes for questions. So we'll get started with the first one, AmyJune. Andrea asked, "Any good screen readers record?"
Okay, I can take this question two different ways. Let me first take it from an accessibility specialist point of view. If you are an accessibility specialist and you're testing screen readers, if you're not a native user, I suggest finding a native user to help you test the screen readers. But then as far as if you're a user using a screen reader, that really depends on individual choices. There's JAWS, but it's quite expensive. So that's a barrier for some folks because you have to pay for it. But, a lot of our operating systems have native screen readers. There's Mac. Our Macs have, a screen reader, and our Windows systems have screen readers. But it's really up to like individual preference because everyone goes through information a little bit differently. My suggestion is if, like, say you have low vision, or even if you're, an accessibility specialist looking into it, do your research online and find, which one requires sticky keys or, mapping of keys. And if that's something you're not familiar with or not comfortable with, look into a different screen reader. So really it's about that comfort level.
Great. Thank you, AmyJune, for answering that question. We have one more here. Great presentation, Amy. Please, is there any way to get the article?
You mean the presentation? Yeah. I will post it on LinkedIn afterward. It'll probably be about 15 minutes because I want to go through and make sure all the links are clickable, all the images are clickable, but I'll post it on LinkedIn, and my LinkedIn is Volkswagen Chick, and the QR code will take you to it. But I just noticed the link on that last slide is wrong, but it is Volkswagen Chick. It should be linkedin.com/in/Volkswagen Chick. But if you just do Volkswagen Chick or AmyJune, I'm typically the first name that comes up, and I'll be sure to post the slides.
Great. Thank you. I see Gracie has shared your LinkedIn.
Oh, great.
URL in the chat for anyone that wants to connect with AmyJune. So Clara has a question. I'm studying to break into web development, but want to specialize in accessibility. Do you have any advice?
Yes, I do. Surround yourself with people who are accessibility experts, specialists, and enthusiasts. This means looking on LinkedIn and finding people who work in accessibility because they post fantastic links, fantastic ideas you might not think about. Follow some disabled people who are into accessibility, and then once you do that, they'll start sharing like articles from different publications, and subscribe to those articles and get weekly digests. DeQ University has a great learning system that International Accessibility Professional. Ooh, I got that acronym wrong. IAAP is another great resource to look into. They have a huge knowledge base of accessibility, not just general, but web. And it really, they kind of hone in on the specifics of what you would like to learn. But again, surround yourself with people who are enthusiasts and specialists, and all that stuff will kind of rub off on you.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Thank you so much, AmyJune. That was an incredible talk. We have everyone saying thank you so much in the chat, and we
Great.
really appreciate your time today and the knowledge that you've shared with our communities.